Sometimes life is messy. Have you ever wished you could refocus your mind, home, relationships, and work life? Join us as we use research-based information to make practical changes and simplify life. This is Life Simplified.
Welcome to Life Simplified. This is Tiffany, and I'm going to be your host for today. For the next several episodes, we're going to be talking about hot topics in the nutrition world. So to get us started, I'm going to dive in on one that has been getting a lot of attention throughout 2025, and that is food dyes. When I first started digging in, there's a lot of opinion on food dyes, and we'll discuss a little bit about how we feel about it, but we are research-based, so I had to dig a little to get some sound information on food dyes. So let's start with, what are food dyes? Simply, what are they? We've heard about them, but let's kind of define them. And so most of what we're going to talk about today comes out of the UK Cooperative Extension publication, Food Dyes, What Should We Know? According to that publication, food dyes are colors added to food, vitamins, medications, or cosmetic products. Food processors might add dye to boost a food's natural color, to help make a food look like the flavor. So like the example they give is they might make it purple because it's grape flavored. And in our minds, that's what we associate with that flavor. And to make colorless food more fun. So especially when you think about things that attract kids' attention, it's just more fun. And added color can also fix color loss from light, air, temperature, and other storage conditions. So kind of give it a little bit of a boost. One person that as I was reading, they described food dyes as cosmetics for food. And I hadn't heard that before, but that makes perfect sense. So if you're trying to figure out what is a food dye, it's trying to pretty up your food. Like, we use cosmetics to cover blemishes, to enhance, to make it look better. And that is what food dyes are doing for our food. Now, they come from two different places, okay? And we're going to talk about the differences because this is where we're getting some attention. Food dyes can come from natural or synthetic, and synthetic simply means artificial, and so that's what we hear a lot about is artificial food dyes. So those are the two sources, so natural or synthetic or artificial sources. So natural sources, when we think about natural food dyes, they would be things like plants, vegetables, minerals, or even animals. So you can get food dyes from animals as well. And so a few really common examples would be things like beets, paprika, and blackberries. They have strong natural dyes within those plants and vegetables. Now, artificial ingredients are made from chemicals. So that's where they're made. This is the area of concern, and this is where we're going to focus a lot today. But when you really break it down, they come from petroleum. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these artificial food dyes. They have a petroleum base to them. So they are chemical. They are the opposite of the natural food dyes. So what products have food dyes? And I'm going to kind of stop going from our resources here and just throw that at y'all. When you think about food dyes, what foods automatically come to mind for you?
I think about candies. Mm-hmm. Now, do I know that there are food dyes in other things? Yes, and I'm sure that I would actually be surprised at some of the things that contain a food dye, but I really think of the brightly colored candy.
I think more of cakes and cupcakes, like birthday parties. You know how they make those elaborate cakes with, for all the fun little kid birthdays and all the dyes that go with it. Something that sticks out is a black dye that goes into those. Like, it turns your mouth, and so I always try to stay away from it just because, it's like, who wants to walk around, with your mouth dyed different colors? So I guess that's kind of what sticks out to me, and I would be interested to see what they use I'm assuming it's probably a chemical to get those deep colors, but that's what comes to my mind.
And I think of fruit snacks.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I think, because they may not turn your mouth, but they're, all different colors and everything. And so that's where my mind went when you asked that.
Yeah.
But they're a fruit and they're healthy, right?
Wrong. Negative. That is a negative.
They say fruit snacks. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I was just going to say, and they also say real fruit snacks. So
Some do. Yes. So yes.
Real fruit juice.
Just kidding, listeners.
like real fruit juice. Exactly. That's another one. The fruit juices.
Yeah. If you think about it, all the things you said, they're those really brightly colored, like eye-catching colors. And a lot of them are the snacky foods is what we think about. So the candies and the cakes and those type of things, but also like the chips and just all kinds of different snacky foods are what I tend to go to in my mind. But as I was doing research, I was a little... I'm not going to say shocked because I think somehow I knew that there were these food dyes in a multitude of different things, but there are some surprising places that we are getting food dyes in our diet. And so I found an article from Rutgers University, and Emily Barrett, who is a professor in their School of Public Health, said this about some of the things that food dyes are in, and I was a little bit surprised. She says in her article that you would be surprised at how many foods contain petroleum-based dyes. It's not just brightly colored candies, chips, cereals, sports drinks. We forgot about that one, but sports drinks are a big one. And fruit snacks and drinks. Many other types of processed foods also have food dyes. So things like prepared meals. And at first I was like, what's a prepared meal? But your mac and cheese definitely has food dyes in it. Salad dressings have food dyes in them. That one kind of caught me off guard. But also like sauces, marinades, they all have some added food colorings in them. Or they can. They might not all, but it's in there if you check your labels. Yogurts. Think about some of the yogurts that your kids eat, the ones that are like strawberry flavor and they color them pink, or they have a different, you can tell like there's something in there. And even more. And she says this, and this is where I got a little bit surprised and where I'm like, we have to be smart consumers. We have to be aware consumers. Sometimes it is not obvious from a product's appearance that it contains food dyes. So even white cake frosting and brown cereals contain food dyes like Yellow 5 and Yellow 6. Well, I mean, I was surprised about the white frosting.
The white.
Yeah.
And that you're putting yellow in it to make it white.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't know about you all, but this has been gaining momentum for the last few years, some attention. And I have had instances where I've had parents whose child were invited to my child's birthday party ask about what we were serving, like for cake or cupcakes or what the dessert would be, and have asked about food dyes and where I was purchasing my cake or my cupcakes. And so I've even had parents be like, listen, we're really limiting this. We'll bring a cupcake of our own for our child to have so they can still participate, but we know that it doesn't have food dyes. So it's really important to some people, and they've really been digging in and doing research for a while. So it's something to be aware of because people, like, this is big stuff. And we don't necessarily have all the research yet. It's something that's still being looked into regularly, and we're getting more information. But particularly this year, in 2025, there's been some big things that have been happening as far as regulations. And so that's kind of where I'm going to go next. And there's a lot of information, so it might feel like a little bit of an overload. But I think it's important for us to know what the U.S. is doing in relation to these artificial food dyes and what that process is going to look like, because it will affect consumers in the coming years. So it's good to have this information. So the first piece that I'm going to read to you comes back from that UK publication on food dyes. And this was kind of at the beginning, before everything was happening. So It said, as of May 2025, the FDA has approved 8 artificial colors for use in food and drinks. And so the colors that we're seeing in most of our foods right now, those artificial colors, are blue number 1, blue number 2, green number 3, orange B, citrus red number 2, red number 40, and yellow number 5, and yellow number 6. So some of these food dyes are also approved for use in other countries. It's important to know, like, if you travel abroad, these things are different in every country. Like, everybody has their own regulations. But other countries may use food dyes that the United States has not approved. So they may be using some things that aren't approved for use here, and they may not be approving some of the things that we have approved here. So it's going to vary if you're traveling, and this is a concern. It's something you're going to have to look into for wherever you're going. Some countries also use warning labels on their packages to let people know this is what's in here. This is what food dye is in here. So they'll allow it to be in the food, but they're making sure that there is a label noting awareness that's not just the ingredients list. It should always be in the ingredients list, but you may not always know to look for it. So each country has different rules. For example, in the European Union, yellow number 5, yellow number 6, and red number 40 must be labeled with may have adverse effect on activity and attention in children. So they're very specific with how those food dye colors affect a certain population. Now, in January of this year, January of 2025, the FDA banned the use of red dye number 3 in food, beverages, and oral medications. So that kind of was the spark this year that got things going. That red dye number 3 was banned because research showed that red dye number 3 was causing thyroid cancer in rats. And so because of that, they started taking a closer look at that dye. And there was no evidence so far of any similar effect in humans, but, and this is important, because of the Delaney Clause in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, it requires banning the use of additives that cause cancer in humans or animals. So we've not necessarily seen this in humans. And typically they're feeding a much higher quantity to rats than a human would consume in their lifetime. But they did see that it was causing some cancer, and so it has been banned. Now, important to note, because it's been banned and it was announced that it was banned very beginning of 2025, but companies have until January of 2027 to remove red dye number 3 from their products. So I want consumers to be really aware. Yes, it's been banned here in the United States, but they have 2 full years for it to be removed from their products. So don't go on the assumption that it's banned, it's not in there, this is now easy, safe for me to consume without that being in it, because they have time. And so you want to be aware of that. Some common foods that would include this dye, so things that you might have consumed or you may be consuming that use this, are cherries, like in canned fruit cocktails. They'll be used to enhance that. Maraschino cherries, so like the ones that come in the little jar and they're really pretty and brightly colored. And seasonal candies. So you think about like your Christmas candies with your bright reds, those type of things. Again, that is the first step in things that are being banned, but we have gone further. So that was early this year, and as we've gone in through the year, there's been more. So there is actually a whole argument I have here. It's a media release. So I have a news release that came out the end of April. So April 22nd, 2025, and this was from Washington, D.C. And it says, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration today announced a series of new measures to phase out all petroleum-based synthetic dyes from the nation's food supply. A significant milestone in the administration's broader initiative to make America healthy again. Now, that was the beginning of their news release. Now, they break it down into the actions that are going to take. So the FDA is taking the following actions. 1, establishing a national standard and timeline for the food industry to transition from petrochemical-based dyes to natural alternatives. So they're kind of setting wheels in motion. They're setting that we're going to have a timeline. We know it can't happen overnight, but we want to go from here to there, and we're going to start working on that. Number 2 is initiating the process to revoke authorization for 2 synthetic food colorings. So they're revoking these authorizations, citrus red number 2 and orange B. And that goal was to be within the coming months. Now, I cannot tell you if that has happened yet or not. This was the end of April, so I don't know as of the time of the recording this if that has fully taken place yet or not. The third action step is working with industry to eliminate 6 remaining synthetic dyes. So the green number 3, red number 40, yellow number 5, yellow number 6, blue number 1, and blue number 2 from the food supply by the end of next year. So their goal is that all of those that we talked about that are currently approved be completely phased out by the end of 2026. Which is actually quicker than we just read about red number 40. They want it completely out of things by January 2027. So, number 4, they want to authorize 4 new natural color additives in the coming weeks and also accelerate the review and approval of others. So, they're trying to give alternatives quickly so that companies that are using these synthetic dyes will have a natural option that they can swap to within that timeline. So that means pushing through some approvals maybe a little bit quicker than would typically happen. And then number 5, partnering with the National Institutes of Health to conduct comprehensive research on how food additives impact children's health and development. So continuing that research, those studies, those deep dives into how this is affecting our youth as they grow up. And then number 6, requesting food companies to remove that red dye that we talked about sooner, the red dye number 3, sooner than the 2027-2028 deadline. So they're moving everything up. Like everything is happening light speed. So according to this press release, we might see a very big switch in our food dye realm in the next little bit. So I don't know. Was that news to you all? Had you all heard all of these things?
I had not, but it just really blows my mind about the petroleum of where they're coming from in that. I have had a little experience as far as making sure what foods and that have especially the red dye 40 because of my granddaughter. Her mom tried to, cut all of the dyes out in that. And I mean, it is in so many foods you don't even recognize. I mean, all the different dyes, but it just blows your mind that it did come from petroleum. I guess I'm just blown away because of that.
And I've heard a lot about the red dye 40, and I knew that we were trying to move towards removing them from the food supply, but no, I did not know that it was coming so quickly. And I'm really interested to see what these natural dyes are and how that's going to change what our food looks like. Because I think we as consumers are so used to seeing that bright color. And with these changes, we will have to know that that's not what that's going to look like. And maybe that'll be easier for adults. Maybe. I'm going to do a big maybe there. But for kids, because they do. I mean, I'm kind of a big kid too. I like those brightly colored candies. But what is our food going to look like now?
I've kind of transitioned over the past, my son's 3, but when I started buying popsicles, you know how they are, there's so much color in them. I actually found a natural flavored popsicle. So we've used those and we haven't had any issue. He's never asked why is this not a color? Like, it has indication on the outside, like there's a little orange bear or a blue bear, and it tells you what the flavor is. So he'll see that color and know what flavor it is. But the popsicle itself is clear. Like, it's just a clear.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, does the popsicle have a color?
It looks just like ice.
I mean, I love that for two reasons. One, you're not getting those artificial dyes, but also, like, popsicles stain everything.
They do, yes.
So, like, you're mess-wise, that also is saving some problems.
Yes. Still sticky.
Yeah.
But, so, I've not noticed it, but like I said, we started with that, and he does have, I'm not like, you can't have a popsicle with dye. I'm not over that, because, grandparents, they just, they're cheaper to buy once because they are a little more pricier.
Yeah.
But he's not ever really said anything about it or questioned why they weren't colors. So I don't know. It may not, as
Could be.
Now for us, like, I'm fine with it now, but I was just kind of like, this is interesting. But I never really, you can't really taste that there's a difference. The taste isn't as strong, I don't think. Like, there is still a flavor, but it's not as intense in those. But I was interested to see all the different ones. Like, I've only heard about red and just maybe the blues, but not the yellows and all the different colors.
Yeah, and I think we hear the most about the red dye because I think that's the one we've heard more research on. And that's one thing I kind of want to get to as well, because I've mentioned that they did some research and some rats were having cancer because of the artificial dyes. But there are also some other concerns and reasons why I think we're looking at going away from some of these synthetic dyes. And so there is an article that was written by Dr. Eugene Arnold, and he is a child and adolescent psychiatrist from Ohio State Wexner Medical Center. And so in this article, he talks about who tends to be the most sensitive to ingredients in food dyes and what some of those health risks are. And so one group is anyone who has been diagnosed with ADHD, may be more sensitive to artificial food dyes. And they are finding in some research studies that food dyes can make ADHD symptoms worse. And so I think that's that red a lot of times that we hear, and that's where we're seeing more and more parents being really aware of what their kids are ingesting. But also oppositional defiant disorder. That's another one, like children who have a pattern of being angry, irritable, defying parents and other people in authority can experience more of those behaviors after having food and drinks with those artificial dyes. So like it's exacerbating those ADHD symptoms, the same thing with the oppositional defiant disorder, but then also anxiety. So he says bacteria in your gut can affect your mood and anxiety, and food dyes could affect how bacteria in the gut function, making anxiety worse. I think there is reason for us to think about it, to take pause, to dig deeper, to read the research and the information out there. But it's clear that there are reasons that we're wanting to make a shift, that we're looking at this, we're digging into it, because I think a large amount of our population is facing some of these diagnoses. And if it is making it worse, it's like we're fighting against ourselves. So anything we can do to help, because I would hate to see a child or an adult who has been treating this and working through things and doing all of the proactive stuff, but then our food that we're ingesting, it's, an uphill battle. So I think that's something for us to look at. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is where you all were just going. Like, you were reading my mind, but it's like, how will this affect our food supply? How does this affect, consumers and what we purchase? How does it affect how it tastes and looks and all of those things? And so the University of Kentucky publication says changes in laws about food labeling and food ingredients push the food industry to make changes. Examples of changes include clearly labeling products so buyers can make informed choices, and updating products to lower, swap, or remove food dyes, which we're heading towards that swap, remove kind of way. The process of researching, developing, and implementing changes could lead to higher food costs. And I think that's something reasonable to think about. And, Amanda just said those popsicles, they're a little higher. And so you can expect, as the industry is working on this, there may be some hikes that we see and that we're aware of. So that is one thing. Cost could be affected. And changes in one state can influence the types of food products available in other states. So right now, this is FDA. This is the whole nation. But if individual states were to start making some of their own guidelines, that would affect, if you're shipping across state lines. But for the most part, this is a nationwide kind of thing. Emily Barrett from the Rutgers professor that we talked about earlier states that removing these synthetic food dyes would cause no change in nutritional content. So nutrition wouldn't be affected at all. So the nutrition you were getting before, you're getting that same thing with or without these artificial food dyes. And minimal, if any, changes to the taste of the affected foods. So she's saying it's not really going to affect your nutritional value. It's not going to affect your flavor, your taste, but their appearance might change. So it's mainly, again, remember, this is cosmetics for your food. So it's going to change the appearance of what our food looks like. But this was a quote I thought was intriguing, and I think it gave me pause. So I wanted to share it with you all. And this was from Dr. Eugene Arnold. And he said, if you see smoke, you should investigate whether there's a fire. And in the meantime, you should evacuate the children just to be safe. And I think that's kind of a word picture of where we're at with this whole food dyes is we've seen okay, there's some smoke. We don't know if it's a fire. We don't know how big the flames are. We don't know how deep they run, but we know there's a little smoke. There's a little something happening. And so we have to pay attention. We have to investigate. We have to research. We have to dig deeper. And in the meantime, being more aware and starting to shift some decisions may not be a bad decision. I think being proactive is never necessarily a bad thing. So I thought that was an interesting quote. I kind of liked it. It made me think. And so do y'all have any thoughts about that?
I think it's a good quote. One thing I'm just kind of sitting here kind of thinking, really, we've established, we know kids are attracted to these colors. Adults are attracted to the colors. So is there going to be a shift in decline of people eating sweets and things like that? Is it going to make us healthier in a different way? Because people aren't, if you see, say, M&Ms or, whatever candies, Skittles or whatever, or is it going to be well, it's just not the same. I'm not going to eat it.
I do wonder that. And I know there are already some places you can get these natural food dyes. You can order them. There are bakeries that are already going that route. And they can make them fairly bright and lively. Right. A lot of times you tend to see more pastels than your really bright, strong neon colors and some of those things. I think about candy shops. Or the game Candyland. Everything is just excessively bright and visually appealing. And I don't know if we'll ever get to that level again. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the shift affects everyone. And I think maybe it'll be a generational thing because we're already exposed. We've gotten used to things looking a certain way. Maybe even our kids have, but the younger ones, like your kids, are really young. And the ones that come after them, they may not know any difference. It may just be their normal. So for those of us that are shifting, I think it'll be the most obvious, and we'll see how we respond. I think for the next generations, it'll just be what they know. And it would be interesting to see how the countries that have already made the shift, if they've seen any of those type of impacts. Of course, you'd probably have to consider other regulations that they have as far as nutrition. But I do think there will be an impact on multiple levels, sort of like they talked about, But I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. I think we're on the cusp of something fairly large.
I feel like it's going to be all in the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Those companies are going to have to really, and I'm not a marketing guru, but, thinking about shifting that to make, I don't know if it's packaging or highlighting, hey, we are using natural, and to attract more people. But that's definitely, I think, going to change too.
And I do think overall, consumers are craving more knowledge. They're wanting more information. They're wanting a better understanding of what is in their food, what they're consuming, what they're feeding their children, how it's affecting them in the long run. And so I do think the packaging, like, you see it all the time now for other things. Like, we already see non-GMO and gluten-free and those buzzwords that we may hit some of those here in an episode or two. But people are paying attention, and my best advice is make sure you know where you're getting your information. Like, I think it's great to get information, but be careful of your source. Is it solid? Is it accurate? And keep digging for yourself. Don't just take everything for face value. I think we have to dig deeper.
Well, and we see all kinds of opinions on social media, and sometimes we take those opinions as fact when they are not. So I like that you pointed out that make sure that your source is a research-based source, and where is the information coming from, and reading your food labels.
Yes.
Looking at them, especially if this is something that is interesting to you. We're talking about all kinds of nutrition topics over the next few weeks, and I have a feeling we'll be talking about reading those nutrition labels multiple times and making sure that your source is legit.
Absolutely. And I think one thing as a mother, what I want to say is don't let this overwhelm you, because it can be scary. And we read these things and like, what are these health side effects? And what have I been already feeding my child? And we can get panicky and we can get overwhelmed. And then we feel like we're, again, fighting that uphill battle because I've already been feeding this. How do I switch? Do I have access to the different, without dyes yet, because it's not really here yet. It's just coming. Just know it's okay. Information is power, and small steps make big impacts. And that's what we've always been about here. Like, we can't shift our whole lives overnight, but we can make small changes that will make big impacts. And so part of the article out of the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension talks about what can I do to limit exposure to food dyes. And I think that's really our goal right now, is we just want to start lessening some of that exposure. We may not be able to cut it out entirely, but there are some things we can do that are pretty simple things that we can do. So one is just like focusing on whole foods. And we've heard that for a lot of different reasons, but your whole foods are your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, your animal and plant sources of protein, because all of those are much less likely to have food dyes in them. Now, can they have food dyes? Yes, absolutely. Still check your labels. But when you're eating whole foods, you're much less likely to have any of those artificial food dyes in them. Also, if organic is in your budget, and that's a big if, because that can be really pricey and groceries in general are expensive. But if it's in your budget, organic is an option for foods that are free of artificial food dyes. So when you buy organic, you can know this does not have an artificial food dye in it. But again, do not break the bank. Like, finances are important too. We have to weigh like our pros and cons. Another one is choose to drink water. And you can infuse your water with fruit, herbs, vegetables to give it some more flavor without adding dyes. So we know water does not have artificial dyes. And we can add in all those whole foods, those fruits, those veggies we talked about to give it some flavor and make it a little more exciting, because it can be hard when we're used to sodas and sports drinks and all the fun stuff and sugary things to switch. Transition yourself slowly. Make it a goal to cut out one of those beverages and switch it to water, and then get yourself there. But check the food labels. That is the biggest one, and you're going to hear it over and over again. Be wary of claims on packaging for healthy or natural, because we can write things on our packaging that may not necessarily be the whole story. So look at the ingredients list of packaged foods. Products that say artificial color or list FD&C, which is the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, dyes, have food dyes. So if they say artificial color or they list FD&C dyes, that is artificial food dyes. And I did see, and I didn't dig into this enough, so this is something we need to dig in a little bit more. I do think there are some names for these artificial food dyes that don't use the numbers, and that's how they sneak it in. So you need to be aware too. If this is something I want to start checking my food labels, don't just glance and not see a number or not see that FD&C in a number and think I'm safe, because they have really long technical names to these food dyes as well. So you can look that up, find that list, and check and make sure that those aren't in there too, because it could be a hidden food dye that's not quite as easy to spot. But they go on to say, as experts do more research, we will have a better understanding of how our bodies absorb, use, break down, and get rid of food dyes. More research on this topic may lead to changes in rules and laws around the country, and we're already seeing that, so that's happening in real time. In the future, the number of approved food dyes may change, and they are. With the elimination of food dyes or the addition of new food dyes, it will take time for food and supplement manufacturers to respond and remove them from their products. So it will take time. We're learning more. We're researching more. And then one last thing, just, to throw a monkey wrench out there, is our professor, Emily Barrett, mentioned in her article that we need to be aware as we fast track some of these natural food dyes. We don't always know how that is going to end up being in the long run. So natural doesn't always equal safer when we're using it in a new way. So be aware that we still have to be vigilant, and we still have to pay attention, and we have to keep listening and making sound choices, because sometimes we can switch from one thing and the next thing isn't exactly what we thought it was going to be either. So it's just something to constantly be aware of. But again, don't stress yourself out over it. Focus on some of those easy changes that we talked about, and then just keep researching, keep looking at those solid sources. As we learn more, we'll do more. And so this was a kind of a different type of topic for me. I was really interested in it because, coming from a mental health background, clearly these food dyes are affecting individuals who have mental health diagnosis. And so it's really important for me to understand that. But also as a mom, understanding how these food dyes are affecting my family and what I'm feeding them is really important. So I encourage everyone to dig in, look a little bit more. This is a good jumping off point, and we'll see how things go as all of these different FDA measures start kind of getting into place. Thank you for joining us today. This is Life Simplified.
Thanks for listening to Life Simplified. We are family and consumer sciences agents with the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service. Contact us at lifesimplifiedpodcast@gmail.com.